All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Andreas Hellander, who's today's speaker. He's been here for a couple weeks, and I think he'll be here one more week. So if you have questions after the talk, beyond regular questions, you can bug him. And we all need to congratulate him because he just heard he got a big grant like an hour ago. So
my slides are a bit messy, that's why. I kind of like, I haven't, this is my second grant, so it's new for me. I got a little bit overwhelmed and excited, so I kind of forgot how to talk. It's a good excuse. All right. So I'm going to tell you today about, it's kind of like a long-term effort we've been doing on CSE software for stochastic simulations and simulations in quantitative biology. And specifically, some of this recent stuff we've been doing, we started to explore cloud computing. So this talk is going to have almost no math. But I'm going to put some pointers on some of the theoretical work we've been doing that we can follow up in discussions afterwards. I'm going to try to focus a little bit on and also point out some of the challenges that I see from a CSE software perspective. What can we do what do we need to do as model methods developers to make things practical. So this is what I wanted to do today. So we'll see, and I will also try a few quick demos, but we'll see how that works. So I'm an associate professor in Uppsala University, and I got my PhD degree from there as well in 2011 in scientific computing for Professor Per Löfstedt. So we worked on R-action diffusion master equations and numerical schemes for those, and that's where a lot of the work in this package comes from. Then I was a postdoc in the PETSOS lab for 2 years in UCSB, and worked on started working on the StochSS project. And as a byproduct, when we came home, then we saw some things we wanted to do, and I've been doing this kind of thing then in my lab, MOLNs, which is related to StochSS, but I'll show you how they differ, but still in collaboration with Linus. So this is how things will go. Yeah, and apparently I'll be recruiting a postdoc after the summer. Good candidates. If you think we have to work on something like this, let me know. So the outline of the talk, I'm going to talk about a little bit briefly about some application, like one application of this, and where it can be interesting. And I think quite a few of you saw a talk by Mark Chaplin in Edinburgh. So basically just be a really brief overview, but from my perspective, because I was also part of that work, we used the PyURDME software, so we'll see that from software perspective. I'm going to give you a very brief primer on what cloud computing. So how many of you have used cloud environments in your daily work? Few of you. And how many will consider yourself, have a thorough understanding of the concepts of cloud computing? Yeah, good. So neither of you will benefit from this. And then I'll talk about these packages, and then I'll see if I have some time. I have this discussion question that I think that's fun to put up. So what I wanted to tell you about first is this work we did on, and this was in collaboration with Mark Chaplin's group, and a very talented student at that time, and now a postdoc at Imperial College, Mark Stark. So we looked at a very well-studied system in quantitative biology. It has one in regulatory network, which is essentially a prototypic negative feedback loop model. So it's a bit fun with this is that in different cell types there has been actually some experiments on this and measurements. But it's essentially modeling the central dogma. Some of these parameters has been measured in specific systems, some has not. Plays a central role in timing of some mutagenesis, and I think one of the reasons that Mark's group was interested in this is its relevant potential target for cancer therapies. But what we looked most at was this link to differentiation response in embryonic stem cells. So what is interesting about this is that experimentally, you will observe, if you take this HES1 protein, and you will observe very large variability in oscillatory patterns in this HES1 protein in live cells if they are not interacting, so if they are in isolation. And this is experimental data from a nice paper by Kobayashi et al. Mark might is on it. Sorry for the bad resolution. But these are like sample trajectories then of all this HES1, total HES1 copy number measured in these embryonic stem cells. And it is linked to this heterogeneous differential response that you will see. So if the problem is if you take stem cells down and you want to say that you can start with them all synchronized in the same state, and you want to put in a differentiation protocol. But they end up, it turns out to be very hard to make them go, say, to epidermal cells or neural cells. And instead you typically end up with a mixture of cells. And this HES1, and it was elegantly showed, that was kind of implicated in this pathway as driving this variability. So essentially, if you have high copy numbers of this protein at a certain time, you will get one cell fate and another. And then you have this oscillatory dynamics, it quickly loses space in the population. This is essentially what happens there. And I mean, the proposal there is that this kind of involves in regulating cell fate by suppressing loss, turning off cell-cell communication. But what was interesting to me, I think also to Mark and Mark, who's a mathematician, is that there has been a lot of modeling of this system. So in the first paper, this experimental paper in Science, they used some simple ODE models and with a two-state model, and they couldn't find qualitative oscillations, which is not so surprising. So what they did there is they postulated a third unknown species, and then they could get qualitative agreement with this oscillatory behavior and so on. Then, of course, there's been a series of work on this, and I don't have time to go over it in detail, but there was some modeling work with delay equations, showing that if you instead use time delays, you don't have to introduce this unknown species, and you can just get this qualitative behavior correct anyway. But in common to both of these is that you need to use Hill kinetics modeling in extremely high nonlinear terms to get sort of the right behavior. And it also turns out it's pretty hard to get. So what you would expect is that mRNA is expressed in less amount than protein. This would be reasonable, but this is hard to get in some of these models when quantitative. In a paper where you used stochastic delay equations, essentially Gillespie algorithms with delay terms, and what they can show is they can get the same essential behavior and also explain some of the noise with a much less high Hill coefficients, maybe a factor of 5 or 10 instead of 30 or something like that. And this was attributed then to intrinsic noise, that this is sort of driving the system. And then the Mark and Mark did 2D model, where they show that essentially the spatial, you can get away from these delay equations as well if you have spatial models where explicitly account for molecular movement itself. I mean, between protein, of course, needs to get, the mRNA needs to get out of the nucleus to be turned into protein, the protein needs to come back and find the inside to suppress it. So there's a clear spatial component of this. But there's different ways to model it. I mean, but these were some problems that I saw, and then Hill expressions in spatial models I always felt very uneasy with this, so want mass action. So, and also like there were no real evidence from experimental work that there would be this very strong cooperative binding on S1. It might be, we don't know that it is not, but I mean at least there was no prior indication from experiments. So we formulated then the first spatial stochastic model of this, where we essentially made a model of the cell with two concentric spheres, a nucleus and then something grainier model in the cytoplasm, and then a gene site, essentially a small region in the nucleus where the gene is thought to be located. And then just use the same type of reaction network previous models have used. But we postulated that we should only have mass action kinetics. It's unclear what this cooperative thing would mean in this context. And no time delay, so explicitly instead modeling in movement by diffusion. What we found is that when we do this, I mean, we got very surprised, how good both qualitative and actually quantitative agreement it was possible to get with this model. There's still quite a few parameters in this model that is unknown, but at least if you sweep them over reasonable values, at least it's possible to find scenarios where you have quantitative agreement as well. And with quantitative, I would say, I mean, it's in the same ballpark. I mean, there's not the data, biological data is not that rich that it makes sense to put strict confidence into those things. But at least it was much better, and we were quite surprised. So essentially, why I like this example is that for me, this is a good example where one might argue that, okay, but why a complicated spatial stochastic model when you can go away with these simpler models? And then my answer to that is that under the prerequisite that we have methods and software that makes it easy to simulate this spatial model, it's actually quite a bit simpler to put in mass action kinetics, simple rate laws that we can postulate, diffusion constant that is in theory, we can in theory measure, we can relate them to biological quantities, instead of delays that we need to fit to data which we might not have, very high and clearly physically unrealistic Hill coefficients. So in one sense, I mean, this of course requires prior knowledge about the system. And also, the more realism we think we get in the model, the more it makes sense, I think, also to do parameter sweep, sensitivity analysis, and so forth. Because even if you have fitted like a reduced model, we don't really know how it will respond in parameter relations. So this is what I like with this, and I think this is clear that there is some value in being able to just use these spatial models. Another one is like follow-up work, where we can of course start looking into more clearly, spatial questions like putting in the cell membrane, modeling that more or less explicitly, and seeing how nuclear transport, for example, affects the system. So these are things that is conceptually at least easy to do in the spatial model. So the model we're using here is this reaction diffusion master equation, essentially generalization of the Gillespie or the Markov state model to spatial. How many of you are well acquainted with this model? Everyone good. I mean, this is what we're doing, and a lot of work we've been doing is figuring out, this was lots of work I did in my thesis, and I'm working on how we can do this for complex geometries on unstructured meshes by connecting to finite element theory. So in this paper here, and also like in publications and software later, we sort of worked out how practical ways to essentially find jump coefficients of these meshes that have certain properties. And it turns out it's fairly simple. You just connect that to linear finite elements. And I mean, there are theoretical complications, but in principle it works out quite nicely. So this we can do. So essentially, this is how we have simulated this S1 system. This sounds well enough, simple enough, but I think as many of you know, we have a few challenges also with this modeling framework. So the first one, which a lot of us have worked on, but I still think there's lots of work to do here, is the stiffness problem. Not having to resolve all the diffusion. So the computational cost grows enormously with increased mesh resolution. And then I think, I will not go into a survey of multi-scale and hybrid methods here, because many of us have worked on that.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
I mean, how realistic is to have such a small space step? I mean, 5 times 10 to the minus 8. I mean, I'm always trying to get my head around what is a good voxel size. I mean, if you were to take such a fine space step, you would have very, very few molecules. So,
and this one isn't actually that fine, but in principle you are correct. I mean, this is still one of the big open questions, I think, how you use for mesh resolution. But correctly, I mean, with this modeling framework, the idea is that it's fairly large compared to the molecules, so that you gain some computational advantage of using this coarse grain. I mean, this is a coarser model than type of models you are working on or you for these type of models. So, I mean, hopefully we'll save some time. But it can also be, I mean, cases where one species might have to be resolved on a finite grid than the others. This multi-scale aspect. What is nice with this, it's a fairly simple model. It's easy to code up. It's like, you're comfortable with it in some sense, apart from some things, but not so comfortable. The second challenge is also a problem a lot of us in here worked on. modeling considerations. I mean, some of these are, it's not so obvious what the regimes of validity are and how we define validity. So it was elegantly, pointed out by Sam. Is it that long ago now? I'm scaling over. Anyhow, I mean that there is no such thing as convergence. This idea of convergence to a particle-based or a Smoloshovsky-based model by itself. And indeed, I mean, it's not really, the model is not formulated as such either. The simple one. But so one can show essentially that there will be lower limits on the mesh size for which it's impossible to find the fusion limit in mesoscopic rates. That will give, call it, quantitative agreement with even mean binding times of Smoloshovsky. So another problem, and I will not talk a lot about this, this will be, I think, Stefan will talk about this. Another problem we worked on recently is this, we started seeing people throwing in Michaelis-Menten terms and spatial models, and this made me feel very uneasy. But this is probably not something you should just do without consideration. So this is a talk I gave in Banff, so you can see that this way we could use a similar workflow in Banff. It's a video online. So short summary is that you need to be very careful. I would strictly recommend you don't do that, especially in RDME style models. And you should be very careful to do it in well-mixed models as well if your objective is really to look at properties directly related to noise. This is also a problem that Ramon Grima has done a lot of beautiful. But in short, I mean, I said there is some fundamental limit, and I like this picture that I like to draw about this regime where there is going to be some hopefully fairly large regime where you're going to get very useful results, and this RDME style model will be fast. I mean, it will be efficient compared to small scale models. There's going to be some regime where things start becoming less and less accurate, and then some regime where things is just going to totally diverge. I mean, it will diverge all the time. There is no hope to fix anything. And this is also, it's kind of like a fun, so this is also a problem that Radek worked on, Radek and collaborators. So you can approach this in different ways. And me and Stefan did this in one way, so we find some, and Radek also found in 3D some lower thresholds here for which there is no way to scale a mesoscopic rate to match this. But essentially you can, for structured meshes today, choose modified rate expressions, not the Collins-Kimball ones, but you get actually convergence in mean binding times and distributions fairly nicely, or and good agreement with G4D models. But this is of course a challenge then. I mean, how can you make this available in more general geometries for meshes? So this is not a problem that is solved. Anyway, this is just more the same, that you see that you can. But as you point out, I mean, it's probably not more computationally efficient. But it's an important problem from software point of view, because you need robustness. The best case scenario is that your method is accurate and fast, But at minimum, it has to be accurate. I mean, it shouldn't just give you wrong results and you can't really understand why. There's no indication. But a lot of this work is put together then in this PyURDME package that we worked on. So it started as URDME. It was based on console, multiphysics, and MATLAB. So it acted a little bit like a MATLAB toolbox, but you built your models in console and exported them. And this way is, just to mention this is something I like about this approach of using connecting to finite elements to formulate the jump process, because it gives you access to mature software for handling geometry meshes, which is very important when you consider software. And also today, actually, very good open source software that you can use. So this is something we have liked all the time with that approach. So I said this is built in this, and this is like a screenshot. I will show you live, not exactly this one. And as I said, I mean, we apply this to some new regulations or collaborations in a bar by using this software to look at problems that is polarization in button list. And I think Mark Chapman's group is also using it for some modeling work. So PyURDME is built as it's a Python application for the programming interface. So essentially you formulate your models as Python classes using our API. It's quite Pythonic, very nice. I mean, it's geared towards flexibility. I mean, we essentially have two objectives building this. First, it should be possible and fairly quick to prototype and write and construct models in Python. And the other thing is it should be flexible enough for us to keep doing methods development. I mean, this was clearly the way it started for us was that it evolved as a framework where we have a good test bed to build our multi-scale. So this one does not yet include, I mean, we have done a series of papers on multi-scale methods, coupling PDEs and microscopic methods to RDME and so forth. They are not yet included in the package, it's something we're working towards. And I mean, part of the reason I want to stress that, I mean, it is a big step from the theory paper to the practical implementation, especially related to things like robustness. I mean, if you have many parameters, and this is kind of classic CC software stuff, if you have many parameters that needs to be tuned, or needs to be set, and it's not done in an intuitive way, I mean, then actually the software can harm modeling more than it helps. So actually, like the default package here is this next subvolume method that was proposed by Elf. It's essentially just a direct SSA optimized for spatial problems. It is rather optimized, but that's a difference. What is also interesting with PyURDME is that it's kind of like designed in a way to facilitate cloud computing or rather distributed computing. So we have done a lot of work to make it easy to serialize objects and so forth using standard protocols that are used and it's also designed to integrate very well with IPython Notebook, IPython Parallel. So we actually have specific, so we build on Phoenix Dolphin. How many of you have used Phoenix for anything? Yeah. So we build on the Dolphin package, and we have sort of extended. So this is a big open source project. We have extended some of the mesh classes and result classes for inline 3D visualization with WebGL in notebooks. So this is also some work. And then the objective there is not to have like production grade visualization. We will never be able to spend so much time on that, but rather the observation is very important to be able to visualize for debugging. It's kind of key to rapidly convert this. In the interest of time, I was going to give a quick demo of using this kind of like in a command line environment, but I will skip this and move on and show you how we use it. But I think I already touched upon some of these, some of the current work. I mean, we're looking at trying to make, I mean, Stefan and I was looking at, I think maybe he will tell you or no, but making some of this theory down practically usable inside PyURDME for NLV and meshes. Looking a little bit at molecular crowding approximations. Of course, looking into sort of sharpening some of these methods we developed, hybrid methods, to try to make them, I mean, for example, with adaptive error control and things like this, that is kind of essential for robust numerical solvers. And also something that I'm doing, but this is kind of like starting up. So it turns out the way we designed it, that it is kind of, we were a bit surprised, but it's very nice. I used it to build, multicellular models based on this. But this is, we can discuss this offline if someone is interested in that. But this is a direction I'm planning to take. And so, but some observations. I mean, we need to do software because manually handling this is simple to us. It's simple finite element here, but it's quite complicated if you don't know the data structures. It makes sense to use someone's software even if you are competent in programming or you know some maths, because actually there's a big difference between a naive implementation that works and a one that is really efficient when it comes to these data structures. So you kind of need to pay attention and know what you're doing and be aware of, especially when it comes to unstructured meshes, about the mesh data structure you use and that you optimize access patterns and these kind of things, which we have spent a lot of time. But the big problem going forward in this talk is also big computations and big data. Now we have a package where we can easily build models, we can simulate them. But what we really are interested in, especially like in the S1 work, so what we did there is that we did huge parameter sweeps. I used 60 cores of a university cluster for 4 weeks. I don't think this is uncommon. We emulated many terabytes of data that we had analyzed in multiple passes. And this was a formidable pain in the ass, to be honest. I mean, it was a lot of work, even for me, that is a computing expert. So, can we do this simpler? I mean, this is a problem. And that is where we get interested in cloud computing. So, very quickly, I mean, there's a lot of buzz about cloud computing, and companies are trying to define this in ways in their interest. But I like this definition from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So essentially, it's a model for convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. So what does this mean? It essentially means that it's all, and that it is self-managed. So in principle, you should be able to yourself self-service yourself the compute resources you need. And it's associated with these 3 basic service models: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And it can be sort of depicted like this. Essentially, like this cloud computing comes from this notion. I mean, service is sort of obscured as obscured by a cloud. They're there somewhere, you don't really know where they are. So for example, on the infrastructure level, we have providers like Amazon Web Services, HP, Rackspace. And this is a Swedish national cloud initiative. So we're providing self-service to compute resources through virtual machines, but also block storage network. On the platform level, you get some additional value. You have programming environments, APIs, that you can use for more rapidly constructing applications by sort of abstracting away the infrastructure layer. And then ultimately where we sort of want to go is like the software as a service level. I mean, you all use Google Documents and these kind of things where you actually just come and consume a resource, typically through a web interface. And then you don't even have to worry about it. You don't typically know where it runs. You don't really care. This is very simplified, some of these basic ideas. So what can it do for us? It can do a number of things, but as a software developer in computing now, it gives me convenient and reliable access to a large variety of services from infrastructure to applications. And we can use them to build applications, which is interesting. And I mean, this is something that is usually not automatic, but it's a good promise that you can come up with applications that fairly easily can grow and shrink elastically. This is a way to, if you have uneven usage patterns, I mean, this is one of the big selling points of cloud, that you can consume your resources on demand when you like them and release them when you want. So from a business perspective, this is not so interesting, but I mean, it can lower cost of entry by giving immediate access to resources. I mean, this is also valid in a scientific context. I mean, you can get immediate access to a Ubuntu server in minutes if you have access to a cloud, instead of going to your IT department and waiting 2 months for someone to get the stuff done. Some of you might be lucky and you have like a lead time in 2 days, but it could easily be weeks. No upfront investment, and it's easy to scale services. And it's also like to enable a lot of new classes of like applications, like mobile applications and Internet of Things. So for us, essentially what I see is convenient access to development environments. It's a big thing for me. I can test my code really quickly in different platforms, different environments. It simplifies, I would even say for me, this makes it possible for me to do CSS software in my lab, because it takes a lot of money. It doesn't actually pay off that much in terms of publications and reputation. So if I can use virtualization and focus much less on distribution, for example, I can make this work on Ubuntu 14.04, Ubuntu long-term support, and I can still reach users. I mean, that's a big gain. That can make the difference from having to have graduate students doing packaging and wasting research time, and actually getting something out there. And also when I do these sweeps and stuff like that, I can actually get a lot of resources in a short time if I have a deadline. So I don't have to wait, I can just pay for it. Some deployment models. I will skip this, but essentially there's different types of clouds. So what we're seeing today in the cloud, what is typically, I mean, we think of it as Amazon Web Services, but it's actually quite a rich, ecosystem and mature open source solution. So a lot of organizations will have, like my university, we have several private clouds. How many of you have private clouds at your departments? So we have a number of those initiatives, and also in Sweden we're building a very large community cloud based on OpenStack. So it gives federated access to supercomputing resources all over Sweden. This will be over 4,000 cores. This is a community cloud, and then hybrid is kind of a combination. So this is kind of where the IT sector is today. That there's a lot of work on facilitating consumption of maybe using your private cloud and bursting to a public or community cloud. So MOLNs is then a solution we made based on cloud computing to simplify these things I talked about. First of all, lower the threshold of adoption of PyURDME is what we hope to achieve. It's one thing. By removing the need to install all of this on your laptop, because it can be quite hard. Phoenix depends on essentially every scientific computing package that has ever been written, and it's hard to install. I mean, they are also making work to make it easier based on some of the same approaches, but it's hard to install if you don't know what to do. So we can remove some of this barrier, and we also wanted to make something. I mean, we're basing it on IPython to make it easily shareable, and we also wanted to solve this problem of taking a PyURDME model and easily creating large ensembles or large parameter sweeps. They shouldn't be complicated, it should be a one-line. As I said, this is the big driving force, that we want to take our models and our solvers and just fork out and generate a lot of trajectories and then aggregate them essentially in a map-reduced kind of way. So these simulations run, they're quite expensive, but they're complete. I mean, all these kind of workflows are embarrassingly parallel, so they map very well to cloud environments, even to cheap ones that have good network connectivity. But in the same time, why not just run this in a batch system in the cluster? I mean, still, it's nice if we have a converged solution where we can both, a lot of this time spent for the modeler is building this model, writing it up, trying to make your action network do roughly what you want to do, or developing solvers. All of this really needs interactivity to be productive. So if we can have an environment that is both interactive computing and also scalable, that is nice. So this is what we try to achieve. And then we did it is we built a lot on IPython and IPython parallel. We wrote a command line client that essentially manages cloud providers. So it will take and package up automatically. So you use a simple command line client tool. And essentially, if you have an OpenStack cloud or an Amazon cloud, it will prepare images or prepare things for you. And then it will also manage this, starting controllers of the cluster, starting workers, connecting them from different clouds. So this is what this kind of thing does. And it's essentially, what the only thing a user needs to do is enter their credentials to the cloud provider, and then you're done. You have to wait 30 minutes. And then it will start environment based on IPython, and these engines will automatically connect. This is just using IPython frameworks. We also spent a lot of time writing this utility library that essentially uses IPython parallel to implement these parallel workflows, in particularly an ensemble and a parameter sweep. So you can take these model classes and you can just fork out and do ensembles and parameter sweeps. Another problem that was not solved by IPython was the fact that we need to make use of the cloud, some cloud hierarchies of storage. So this is also something we built in here. We made abstractions for, should your data be persistent? Should it go into object store, which is you can think of as a Dropbox-like storage that is available in this cloud, or should you just store it on the compute engines? Is it something you want to keep? Should you cache it locally? These things we had to spend actually a lot of time doing. So this was the hardest part. And then we have simulation engines plugging in there. So we have done it for PyURDME, but we have also done it. Now we actually done this for another package called SPy. And it's actually, it's not hard to just by putting in some configurations where you can put in whatever you like. And it's actually generalized this as well, so you can actually make use of this. You have to write a little wrapper class if it's not PyURDME. You have to write a little wrapper class to make use of this automatic parallelization. So So I'm going to do it like this because I see that I'm, as usually, talking too much. So what I will do is I will finish up the slides, and then at the end I will just show you a quick demo of both MOLNs and PyURDME. At the end of the talk it will be more efficient that way. But essentially this is the architecture of MOLNs. So as I said, we have abstractions for storage. We can manage workers in multiple clouds, and this is all thanks to IPython, of course. And then this MOLNs client, which was also a lot of work. So this is standard, essentially, master-slave architecture. But doing this, as I said, we can implement many types of workflows. So I mean, we can run everything locally. We can run things distributedly without any without storing anything as piping trajectories through post-processing functions, which essentially is where the biology happens. It's where you take your trajectory data and convert it to something interesting, copy number, total copy number, or protein co-localization parameters, I mean, you name it. And this one you also specify this post-processing function. But also distributed in multi-cloud environments. This is quite nice, I think. I was surprised how well it worked. And I should mention, I mean, a lot of this work was done by a really talented researcher, Brian Dort, in UCSB. So he's a very good computer scientist. Makes a lot of these things happen. So that was MOLNs, and now it's a bit abstract, but I will show you afterwards. I mean, this is available code, and it actually works. So if you have worked with cloud computing, you will see that it was written, most of it 2 or 3 years ago. So some of it is not using the latest, contextualization and orchestration tools. On the other hand, it's very, very robust. It uses mostly Paramico and other things to orchestrate things. So it actually can recover from failure in a nice way, which I'm sure that a lot of these platforms can do today, or like OpenStack Heat or other things. But when we started with this, if you have used Cloud Init, for example, we had tons of problems. It was just so non-robust. So I'm saying this because if you look at this and have done some cloud computing recently, it might look a little bit insane that we have written all that code. But now it is there, it works, so it can be there. So what is StochSS then? I mean, what the problems we solve with MOLNs is essentially we wanted to give a powerful environment to ourselves and to modelers that are comfortable programming PyURDME models and writing simple scripts, and want the full control of like having, say, a Python environment where you just tap into your output. You can write whatever downstream analysis you wish using scikit-learn or whatever. So that is that. I mean, it's kind of targeted at computational biologists with computational skills, but not necessarily skills in distributed computing and cloud computing. Because those, at least at my department, or my experience is that those two are kind of different communities. It would be good if you had more students that were converged a bit on computer science and math, but I think a lot of it is different. StochSS is a big project led by Linda Petzold, and I'm also participating as one of the PIs now from Uppsala. And it started as a collaboration with a cloud computing group in Santa Barbara as well. And we call this Stochastic Simulation Service. We've been actually doing this for a while, and now I would say it's getting to the point where it's actually pretty useful. And here we're trying essentially to solve the problem of making all these tools available to biologists. So this is kind of this is a software project. Pretty simple. So here we want to make things as easy as possible, sacrificing maybe some flexibility, but the goal of having it available in cloud environments and the capacity to scale resources for large experiments is still there. So this is one of the requirements as well. So why do we build it? So one of the observations and one of these ideas that we had, and Linda has been having all along, is that we know there are very, very many packages out there. There's very many different modeling levels people are using. And we think that for a biology user, it is valuable to have one environment where you can start building your model as a simple ODE model, and then successively scaling it up to well-mixed stochastic models, to spatial models, to 3D models, taking your time, getting some basic understanding of the simple models, and This is also like part of like building up the quantitative modeling process capabilities. But there are many different levels and it's confusing. Tools are sometimes hard for biologists to install because packaging is hard and no one is paying us to do it. So it kind of acts as a barrier. You have to switch tools and you have to learn many things. And it requires large-scale computational resources. It's not enough to get something for these problems that works on your laptop. Eventually you're going to hit the barrier where you need to go to the cluster. You need to have large computing resources. It's just the nature of the problem. So what we support here initially is like ODE solvers, well-mixed stochastic solvers. We don't do PDEs yet, but we will through Phoenix probably. And we do spatial stochastic models through PyURDME. And as I said, the vision is to be a sort of an integrated development environment where you build your model, you can scale it up. And I think what we spent a lot of effort on is this scaling up, making it really easy to convert models between different modeling levels without starting with all the complexity. In the future, we want to make these used for parameter spaces and so then gain insight from modeling and scale. So it's built essentially, as I said, on Stochastic 2, which is a package from InnesLab, PyURDME, C-Roads, and some optimistic others packages. And essentially, this is the vision. So we want this kind of one ecosystem, ultimately, where we can specify problems. We have model analysis tools, we have capable simulation tools and data analysis tools, kind of like trying to make them talk together as services. So we're not completely there yet. Let's say we have this one. This I'm pretty happy with. This one is pretty good. We can always use more simulation tools, better algorithms, faster algorithms. I mean, we're working towards that. And part of giving this talk now as well, and I mean doing it here, is that we have a lot of methods developers. So I would be happy to chat with people that are interested in seeing will this work for my algorithms. And it's realized as a cloud computing application. So here we're doing a web UI from scratch, essentially, using some web frameworks. I talked about cloud already. It's like you can choose essentially to use this on your local laptop, running in the local host in your web browser for the cases where you're just building models, you're fooling around, you're playing with it until you're kind of happy, and then you can deploy resources on Amazon Cloud to scale it. This is what it is. As I said, attached upon this locally as a native application. Still people want that. But I think what is a little bit more exciting is also we make it really easy through actually the small computation system we have to take StochSS and deploy it as a multi-user system. And so far we have not hosted it. I will start hosting it in the Swedish cloud, a trial server, where you can just go and try things. We want to take responsibility for resources. But a big use case for this that I see is that for collaboration, for example. So we make it easy to deploy this. If you have someone that can understand how a terminal that can use the most command line to this point, we can deploy this as a service for a lab to share or for a distributed collaboration to share. So I could deploy it and then me and Sam will work together on some modeling. He's being in Boston, I'm in Uppsala, and we can just models are shared in a public space and we can play with this, and I can also offer resources. I'm a little bit short on time, but I'm just going to show you quickly what it looks like. I think I started a bit after 3 years. So I'm not going to show you the orchestration parts of MOLNs. I can show anyone who's interested in that offline. I mean, how do you actually use this to package up and build a cloud service? But essentially what it looks like, you come in and use it, it'll be something like this. So this is deployed now over a MOLNs cluster. Let's see if we're online. Yes. In the Swedish community cloud that I mentioned. So right now this sits on a cluster with 30 compute cores. And I can easily scale this to 100 if I have resources, I can shrink it. This is just a command line argument that I give to this but it's more interesting. This is essentially PyURDME. Now this model is not so fancy, it's just a simple model of diffusion. But this is expressing a model, a stochastic reaction diffusion model in PyURDME. So you just inherit from a base class from our library. And this essentially gives you access to the API and also these extensions to Phoenix. And in the constructor, you define your species. This will be a little bit fast. You decide this, put in your geometry. In this case, we use some built-in stuff from Phoenix for simplicity. But we can also load files, mesh files from Gmesh. So those are the two we support. And then we can just scatter molecules in this box, and we set some time-span simulation. Yeah, we can discuss this later. It's been a long discussion. This probably should not belong in the model specification. For historical reasons, it does. It's very practical in some cases. So we can do this, and I will actually add some cells. I will go in there. I should have tested this before. I hope it's still functional. Annoying because I don't have a screen mirror, so I can't really see. Okay, so my model is here. Let me see if we can look at the mesh. In this case, it's pretty crude, but you see we have some extensions here that will let you have 3D visualization, interactive visualization. Web browser, which is, as I say, usually not good enough to put in your papers, but it's a good thing for modeling. So this is all PyURDME stuff so far. Maybe one other. So we'll see if I can actually run this. Now I'm simulating. And then, for the same reason, now we have actually a result object which essentially encapsulates the one stochastic trajectory and with associated methods to access data and so forth. So we hide these things. It's using HDF5 in the background. I will say model. Yes, result. So these are other things you can do. It's a bit of a it's a bit cheating now to represent this RDME solution as particles. But it's, this is if someone has a suggestion how to do this for multiple species to visualize them in the same plot on a PD-style solution. It's nice. In StochSS we have some volume rendering. But anyway, moving on. Once you have this model defined, then essentially what MOLNs let you do is specify this. We're going to run an ensemble of this model with 100 trajectories. And this is sometimes where if this cluster has been running forever, sometimes it loses connectivity with engines. Yeah, okay, so now this one was fine. So it just ran these realizations over my 30 cores. This is quite nice. I think this is probably nice for, but this is what we hope. So now next step is really try to push this to some modelers and see if it's useful. But this is for the programmers. And you can do, we have one for parameter sweeps too, so just specify ranges for parameters or iterators for every parameter. You can define them as an argument to the constructor, and then it will just run the parameter sweeps.
So the 7 means how many seconds it took to run?
Yeah, exactly. It's like this is the benchmark notebook. So we published MOLNs. It's in CISC. It's going to come out as part of the special issue from the last year's IMCC big data thing, but God knows when, so we'll see. I think our paper is done, but is anyone here working on their paper? Okay, can I take 2 more minutes now? Okay, this was MOLNs. This is what I use most. Let's see if I can find where I put StochSS. Okay, this is one that up until recently was running in the SNCC cloud, and this is what it would look like if you ran this as a service, just hosting it on a web server. I think unfortunately the SNCC cloud died a little bit an hour ago, so this one is not connected anymore. But I have one. Should have one on localhost. This is StochSS, it's a web app, essentially, where you will go instead, you will go here in the model editor, and you will build your models in a simple graphical interface. And I think, I mean, if you're interested in like with software design stuff, try it. I mean, give us some feedback. I think the guy Ben Bales, a student in Uppsala, did a really nice job making this very productive. What I wanted to do is show you. And this is my point, to deploy this and then you can share models by exporting them as a public library. So I'm going to bring in spatial demo model from the public library. Essentially go and simulate it. So here you get the choice then, I mean, for a given model, now this is a spatial one, so we only have one type of solver, it's the PyURDME solver. For the well-mixed one, you get a similar page and then you get a choice of the solvers available for that model class, model type. So it will be ODEs or it will be well-mixed stochastic. And if I had a cloud backend deployed now, I would also be able to submit this to the cloud. While we wait for this, we can look at a ODE job that I ran, which in this case wasn't very exciting. But essentially here as well, you get, I wouldn't say production level visualization, but enough to support productive modeling. It's kind of easy. I mean, based on the same technology, WebGL, and using a library called 3AS, we'll have some sort of PD style visualization of spatial trajectories. You can choose to render it wireframes or even volume render based on movies and stuff like that. This one doesn't have the particle style yet. But in principle, you see you can easily configure your models in a graphical user interface. You can run simulations and you can look at the output and in a pretty simple way. So this is essentially what StochSS is trying to do. And then if you're so inclined, you will go and enter your credentials. I'm not going to do this now because it takes a little bit of time and I don't remember where I put my credentials for. But you will just input your Amazon credentials and you can just start clusters in Amazon Cloud. So the next release, I'm hoping we will do the same thing for any OpenStack cloud. And I will also make some modifications to host this as a service in the SNCC cloud. So in principle, then the point would be that there's no installation at all. The user will just come to this web service and run things. Then if when you grow out to it, there should be an easy upgrade path to take it and deploy it on your own RAMs machines. So this is it. So back. Yes, so what I wanted to show you, something that I'm really interested in now, and actually what I partly got this grant for is how do we support large-scale modeling and computation? So these spatial models is not so easy to analyze, especially when they become complex and you have a lot of networks. So it's not very easy to just a priori understand, okay, what is this model going to do for you? And you will run it in a stochastic process, and it generates tons of data. It can easily a parameter sweep over 5, a global sweep over 5 parameters, not many points. Can easily generate. We made it easy to do this, at least if you can pay for it if you have access to a cloud. But it will generate, tens to hundreds of terabytes of these stochastic trajectories. And then the question becomes, in this high-dimensional space, first of all, I don't want to look at all these 1 million trajectories. We need automated ways to extract, information. What does this model? What is the essential behavior of the model? What does it predict that could be of interest biologically? And of course, ultimately, combining this with data, high-throughput data that is available from imaging, for example, to use that in conjunction with this kind of type of modeling to sort of exclude parts in parameter space, to fit models to data. Converged solution for this that is capable of working well, also when these data sets become this big. This is one solution I think is needed. It's of course also needed analysis to not have to do this in the first place. I think it's that we are very, very far off of being there for these spatial models, and I think also we might never get there for really complex things. I think both of them. So this is one of one question I'm really interested in right now. So this is something I really happy to hear any suggestions. Essentially at this point we feel that we have the tools, and we still do more methods work. We have the tools to actually build models and run them large scale. So now we need tools to understand, to more quickly converge that biologically meaningful predictions.
So are you working on integrating in any of the other spatial simulation methods?
I'm not doing that now. It's not because we don't want to. First of all, that will require collaboration. Which methods do you think about integrating? MOLNs or we actually started doing this with Koichi Takahashi a little bit, because they also have iPads and stuff. And we actually had a demo with someone. We were at this conference and we had a demo working, integrated in MOLNs, but then we dropped the ball on that and we did too. So in MOLNs, it's easy. In StochSS, of course, we would like that. It still needs to fit there in this kind of general picture of model transitions. And there will be a fair amount of work to integrate the solver, but we would be interested in it. And the benefit would be, of course, that having the software as a service thing is a way to reach out to users. But as you see there, you actually have to write interfaces for the solvers and stuff like that. In MOLNs is much easier. And this is actually something that I wanted to say, but I forgot. So glad you kind of reminded me in an indirect way. Cloud computing. One thing that is really, really nice with MOLNs that I think that I've used myself many times is that I can reproduce the IPython thing is really nice because it gives me computable notebooks. I have my model there, I have my computational experiments. I have sort of the model definition and I have the computational analytics part of the provenance of the experiment. What I don't have is the infrastructure part. Because you can't just take a notebook that someone made and did an experiment that required 4 weeks of CPU time on the Santa Barbara University cluster and some batch scripts and think that someone is going to be able to reproduce this. It's actually very much dependent on infrastructure that not everyone has access to. So with this, I can actually virtualize my whole cluster environment, and as good as I can get, I can have sort of the same. I also have the provenance, so I can replicate the compute infrastructure as well. And I can move it, so I can take this and I can tell you this is how I did this with MOLNs, this is the settings, this is the code, this is the model. And you can go and run this in Amazon exactly the way it looked when I ran it. So for reproducibility, I think, but I'm not saying we have solved that problem with this software, but I think this is a great promise that we can work much more towards. And that will also come into play, we have had lots of discussions at these type of meetings. I remember in Banff about simulators and benchmarks and tests. And in the end, it turns out, I like that idea, but it's still going to be very, very hard because no one is going to install 10 packages, run 10 benchmarks, and mean, using, if you all wanted to integrate with MOLNs, at least we would have an environment where we could execute all the solvers, we could have notebooks for the tests, and we could even run them as continuous integration tests in any cloud environment we have access to. So this, I think, would be an interesting, project for a student to do, or a good master student to take some of these from the web page that was created there and just package it up and make it as a web service. That would be useful.
So how large is the user base for these cloud?
For cloud computing? Or you mean for my packages?
Yeah, just overall.
Overall for cloud computing? I'm not sure. Cloud computing, I think, is taking almost 100% of the public sector ICT market, large part of it. So cloud computing today is not the future. It's not like an emerging technology. I want to stress that. It has already happened. It's already there, and actually, there are lots of challenges in cloud computing that is not addressed by any work that I do. That is also interesting. But so I'm also project leader of this large Swedish project, SNIC, which is the Swedish National Infrastructure for Computing, where we aim at seeing if it's feasible for the Swedish research community to have an infrastructure as a service cloud. So we're building this over old second-generation supercomputers and supercomputing center in Sweden, and using this to build a cloud. And I know of many other initiatives, at least in Europe, and EGI felt like, so this is starting to happen also to universities. So you will have private clouds or larger community clouds emerging here and there. So I think this is a trend we will also see at universities. And I think things will evolve, and there will be some sort of convergence between our traditional HPC environments and cloud environments. So there's some good examples of that from the US, from Pittsburgh, for example, where it must be. So this is something we will see much more, and it's already highly available. So for this, I would say StochSS and MOLNs is now at the point where we have used them ourselves for a long time and we feel comfortable with them. They kind of work pretty well now. So now is the point, I think, where I will start presenting them more and pushing for users to try them. I feel like, we are doing that all the time with our collaborators, but I feel at this point, I'm hoping for an increased adoption. We don't have a huge user base now. One problem is that we didn't really keep track of users either. So, we see the interaction we get on GitHub, essentially. But I think that more should use it. I'm not saying everyone should use PyURDME or everyone should use MOLNs, but I think this general movement towards service computing will be very, very beneficial for the methods developer community. And everyone should use Python or Jupyter or notebooks, computable notebooks, both in teaching